Hello everyone, you're welcome to Lizama Stitches. My name is Amaka. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make this beautiful dress you're seeing on the thumbnail. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. This is my velvet bias. I'm going to use it to design the front, that design on the front. So this is what I'm going to use for it. This is my velvet bias. Now I have 3 yards here, though I might not finish it, but what I have here is 3 yards. Now this is the fabric I'll be using for this tutorial. What I have here is 2.5 yards of fabric. Now my fabric is folded into two. And I have the front panel and the back panel here. Now this is the folded part of my fabric. So I've drawn some lines already. Now I'm going to explain what I did here. Now this is my starting point, which is also going to serve as my shoulder line. This is my bust point. This is the waist point, and this is the full length of the dress, and this is my hemming allowance. Now this dress I'm making, this dress is a cut together shoulder. The cut together shoulder. Now from my waist, now from the starting point, now my bust point is 11 inches. My waist point is 16 inches. And the full length of the dress is 40 inches. Then I have 1.5 inches hemming allowance. Now this dress is going to have opening. It's going to have front slits, and it's also going to have zipper at the back. So the front is going to have allowance for the slit, and the back is going to also have allowance for the zipper. So I'm going to draft the front panel and the back panel together. So I'm using 1.5 inches for the allowance. I'm using 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance and the front slit. So I'm marking my 1.5 inches here. And I'll connect the points. So the back neck width is 3 inches and the back neck depth is 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. The front neck width is also 3 inches, and the front neck depth is 8 inches. The front neck depth is 8 inches. It's going to be a V neckline. So I'm going to connect the points. Now for the shoulder, measurement is half of my shoulder measurement is 7 inches. Like I said this dress is a cut together shoulder. So half of my shoulder measurement is 7 inches. This is 7 inches. Now from this 7 inches point, I'm going to mark my sleeve length. My sleeve length is 11 inches. This is 11 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. Now from this point, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches for my shoulder slant. And I'll connect this point to the neckline. So now from here, I'm going to take my round sleeve measurement. My round sleeve measurement is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7. So this is my 7 inches. This is my 7 inches. From this 7 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance, that gives you 8 inches. So the next thing I'm going to do, this measurement I have here, the measurement I have here from here to here is 19 inches. So I'm going to mark 19 inches here. So I'll connect this point. I'll connect this point to this point. So this is my sleeve length. On the bust point, I'm going to take my bust measurement on the bust point. My bust circumference divided by 4 gives you 9.5 inches. Gives you 9.5 inches plus half inch for ease. I'm using half inch for ease. You know this dress is a free dress, but it's not that free. So I'm using half inch for ease and 1.5 inches seam allowance. So on the waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. My waist circumference is 7.8. My waist circumference divided by 4 gives you 7.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 7.5 inches here. 7.5 inches plus half inch for ease and 1.5 inches seam allowance. So for the hip measurement, I forgot to mark the hip point. So for the hip measurement, I'm going to mark 8 inches from the waist gives you the hip point. 8 inches from the waist point gives you the hip point. So on the hip point, I'm going to take the hip measurement on the hip point. So my hip circumference divided by 4 gives you 10 inches. Gives you 10 inches plus half inch for ease plus 1.5 inches seam allowance. Now on the hem, the same measurement I have on the hip, the same measurement I took here on the hip point, that's what I'm going to take on the hem. So I'm going to take my hip measurement on the hem. My hip circumference divided by 4 gives you 10 inches plus half inch for ease plus 1.5 inches seam allowance. So I'm going to do the same thing on the hemming allowance. 10 inches, half inch for ease, 1.5 inches seam allowance. So I'll connect the points from here. From this my round sleeve, I'm going to connect it into the bust point. I'm just going to do something like this. Connect it into the bust point. From the bust point, I'll connect it to the waist. So from the waist, I'll connect the waist to the hip. You can also do it with your free hand, but I just want to use my curved ruler. So I've connected it to the hip. So from the hip, I'm just going to draw a straight line to the hem. So I'm going to start by cutting the back. I'll cut the back panel first. So I'm going to open the zip. I'm going to open the allowance. I'm going to notch. So I'm going to remove the front panel while I finish the back, and I'm still going to bring back the front panel, but let me just keep it aside. So now for the back, this is the back panel. So this is the waist point. This is the waist point. Now this is the waist point, and this is the zipper allowance. I want to eliminate the zipper bulge. I want to eliminate the zipper bulge. So I'm going to mark 3/4. You can use 3/4, you can use 1/2 inch, you can also use 1 inch, depending on how, you know, how trimmed, how fitted you want it to be. So I'm just going to connect this to this point. You know, this is to eliminate the zipper bulge, and I'll connect this point to this point. And I'll cut it. So this is the back panel. I'm removing the back panel and I'm bringing back the front panel. So this is the front panel. So I'm going to fold in the allowance while I cut off the I'm going to cut the neckline. Don't bother about this. Don't bother about this excess. When we are sewing it, we are going to trim it off. So the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew this front vent with 1.5 inches seam allowance. I'll sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance. Then after that, I'm going to sew the back panel. I'm going to sew the zipper allowance. I also have 1.5 inches seam allowance for the back, 1.5 inches zipper allowance. So I'm going to sew from the lower part. The back is not going to have vent, so I'm going to sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance, and I'll fix my zipper. I'll fix the zipper at the back. Then I'll come back and show you the next thing to do. So this is the front panel. Now I've joined it, and this is what I have. So I'm going to cut off this part. So the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use bias to finish the neckline. So this is how I'm going to sew my bias. Let me turn it to the right side. So I'm going to sew the bias. Now this is a bias tape. So I'm going to sew my bias from the right side. So I'm going to place it like this from the right side. Now let me illustrate with pin. So I'm going to hold it and I'll sew. So after sewing it this way, I'll turn the bias this way and I'll top stitch on the bias. So that's how I'm going to sew this part. That's how I'm going to finish the neckline, the front neckline. I'm going to use it to finish the front neckline. So now this is how I'm going to use this bias. I'm going to place, after sewing with the other bias, finishing this part with the other bias, I'm going to place this one on this and I'll sew. I'm going to sew it this way. I'll sew it down. Now for here, I'm going to fold this in. I'll fold in 1/2 inch and I'll fold in 1 inch and I'll sew. So that's how, the same way I'm going to sew this, I'm going to sew here and I'll have this opening here. Now this opening is 7 inches, but it's optional. You can decide to use 5 inches, you can decide to use 6 inches, 8 inches, depending on how open or how closed you want your vent to be. So I'm going to sew, now this bias, I'm going to use it to, I'm also going to sew it on this part. I'll sew it to this part. I'll sew it here. After sewing like this, I'm also going to sew here. I'm going to do it neatly. I'll sew here. So the same way I'm going to sew here, I'm also going to sew this side. So that's it with the front. Okay. So for the back, now for the back, I've joined the zipper. I have to sew the neck with my bias, just like I explained that I'm going to sew the front. So I did the same thing with on the back panel, and I've also fixed my zipper So this is it. I fixed the zipper and I closed this side. The back doesn't have vent because the front has vent, because the front has opening. So that's it with this. So let me show you how to fix the pocket, so that I'm going to do everything at once. So now this is my pocket. Now I have 4 pieces of this. I have 4 pieces of this. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place my hand this way. I don't have, this is how I used to cut my pocket. I don't have too much protocol for my pocket. So I'm just going to place my hand this way, and I'll just cut. So that's all. That's all. No much protocol. So this is it. So this is my pocket. Now let me show you how to fix the pocket. I'm going to illustrate with pins. So now I'm going to bring the pocket. Now this is the right side of my dress. This is the front panel, and this is the right side. So I'm going to, now this pocket, I'm going to notch one part. I'm notching one part so that I'm going to know the part that is supposed to be up and the part that is supposed to be down. So I'm notching one part. So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place this. Now this is my pocket. I'll place it. I'm fixing it from here. Now this is the waist. This is the waist point. So from the waist point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch from the waist point to fix my pocket. So now this is my pocket. I'm going to place it this way. So I'm placing it right side facing right side, and I'll sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let me illustrate with pins. Now I'm going to pin it with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew it with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing, I'll push the seam allowance on the, after sewing, I'll top stitch. Like, I'll push the seam allowance on the pocket, and I'll top stitch. I'll notch. After notching, I'll put the seam allowance on the pocket, and I'll top stitch. So the same way I did this, I'm also going to do this. I'm also going to fix the back panel the same way. So the same way I did the front, that's what I'm doing on the back panel. So after that, I'm going to bring the front panel and place it on the back panel, right side facing right side, and I'll sew. So now this is how I'm going to sew it. Now for this side, now when I take this to my sewing machine, I'm going to join the shoulders. That is after sewing the bias. After sewing the bias, I'm going to join the shoulders. I'll join the shoulders, and I'll sew the sides. I want to show you everything I'll do, so that I'll just take it to my sewing machine and do it and show you the outcome. So now after sewing the shoulder, I'm going to sew the sleeve, sew it to the waist, and I'll sew to the pocket. I'll sew to the pocket, and I'll come back and sew it down. So the same way I'm going to sew this part, that's how I'm going to sew this part. I'm going to sew the shoulder. After sewing the, I'm going to sew the shoulder. After sewing the shoulder with 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew the sides. I'll sew the sides. Then I'll sew to the pocket, and I'll sew down. So I'm going to do all these things that I just said and show you the outcome. So after sewing, now this is what I have. So this is the pocket, this is the pocket, this is the front, and this is the back. So I'm going to iron this. I'm going to give this a thorough press. I'll wear it on my mannequin and show you what it looks like. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.